Stand with me, please. I'll lead the prayer. Gary, lead the pledge. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, and again, thank you for the opportunity we have to come and serve our fellow man. We pray what we do and say will be in harmony with your will, Heavenly Father. We pray that your guidance will be upon us. And we again thank you for our country. Thank you for the way of life we have. We thank you for the electoral process that we're going through. And we just thank you for all the blessings that you've given us in this free country. We pray that you'll just be with us today, tonight, tomorrow, and all our tomorrows. And let us save us in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. If you'll turn and face the flag and repeat after me. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please, ma'am.
Rhonda Allen.
Here.
Richie Boland. Veronica Buchanan.
Here.
Gary Farley.
Here. She works for us.
Will Jordan.
Here.
Mike Cush.
Present.
Jeff Phillips.
Present.
Steve Sandlin. Mike Vaught. Vincent Windrow.
Here.
Craig Lynch. We have a quorum.
All right. Need a motion on approval of our June 29th minutes.
Chairman, I've reviewed those minutes, find them in order, and prove that they be, and move that they be approved.
Motion approved. Second. All for the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Anything withdrawn or deferred, Doug?
No, sir. Nothing withdrawn or deferred.
Okay, presentation by Beth Chesson, Puckett Creek Best Management Practices.
As part of our stormwater program, we have to do some stream analysis. We've looked at Lytle Creek and associated with Ms. Chesson and CEC. They now have done a study of Puckett Creek. These studies, our summer group in the stormwater has done some help with her and gave her some data, and then they've taken that and done this report, which in turn will help us with our stormwater program. And she's here to give us a presentation on their study they did on Puckett Creek. This is Beth Chesson, who works with Civil Environmental Consultants.
Great.
Thank you for putting me on the agenda today. This is just going to be very brief. Hopefully you got in your packets kind of a summary of the information and the plan. If you're interested in the whole plan, I'm more than happy to provide it to you guys so you can read it and go on the details that we went into. But what you're going to hear today is kind of a summary. First, kind of what started us. Puckett Creek, of course.
Beth, if you don't, can you talk into the mic? Yeah, if you don't mind. Thanks.
All right. Puckett Creek is located both in the city and the county. Just to give you a little background on the project team that started this, Stones River Watershed Association was involved in this. Civil and Environmental Consultants, my company. I'm also a member of the Stones River Watershed Association and volunteered with them on their board. BDY Environmental, Greater Nashville Regional Council helped us with contracting, and the money came from TDEC, the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. This was a grant from their TMDL program. The Stones River Watershed Association was approached by TDEC in 2008 to develop a proposal, and there were a couple of different options, and one of those did address Puckett Creek. Their goal was to protect Puckett Creek. Puckett Creek right now is not on the impaired streams list. There are, in the state size, there are two types of streams, impaired and unimpaired streams. Well, actually three if you add in high-quality waters. Puckett Creek is not impaired, and it's not a high-quality water. As regulated entities, as communities that are required to have stormwater management programs in place, you're regulated to a higher degree on streams that are impaired. So our goal is to try to manage Puckett as an unimpaired stream. TDEC identified Puckett as a threatened stream, meaning that it is likely in the future, if development continues in the way that it has, that that Puckett could become impaired and therefore be regulated to a higher degree. So our scope of work was to classify the stream. There are certain classification systems that are widely accepted in the industry. One is prepared by a gentleman named Rosgan. So we used the Rosgan stream classification system that was completed by BDY and Civil and Environmental Consultant CEC in 2009. Our next task was to develop a regional conceptual BMP plan. BMP is best management practice, not Big Muddy Pond, but best management practices for managing development and stormwater around a stream. That was completed in April, as well as the hydrology and hydraulics study, which is the H&H study right there. FEMA, of course, this is a FEMA studied stream, so you have an actual elevation for the 100-year storm and the 500-year storm identified by FEMA. So we use that data as well. Quite a bit of information from the county and the city was incorporated into the H&H study, as well as the regional BMP plan. And the last piece is what we're doing today and tomorrow, actually. We were going to present to the city SWAC, of which I was a member, but the Stormwater Advisory Committee is no longer together, so I'll be doing a Water and Sewer Board presentation tomorrow, the same that you guys are getting today. So that's kind of our scope. Here's Puckett. Hopefully this will give you some perspective. Puckett Creek runs, it's on the west side of Murfreesboro, the city, and it runs in and out of the city and the county. It is totally within the urban growth boundary. The stream runs from the south to the north. It runs north and converges with Overall Creek. Highway 96, you see there identified kind of towards the upper portion, and 99 towards the lower portion. So the headwater stream where it starts is on the south side of Highway 99. And it kind of goes back and forth. There's been quite a bit of rechannelizing Puckett along 99 done by TDOT most likely. And our watershed, all the areas that drain down into Puckett, is identified with the red line there on that aerial photo. The urban growth boundary is in orange. So that gives you just a little bit of perspective of where we're going to be talking about. Should be interesting to note that the stream section between Highway 96 and 99 is basically a bedrock stream bottom. That's the area for behind Cason Lane, Evergreen Farms, that area back in there, a lot of rock, as we know. And so the stream itself takes on different characteristics than we would anticipate for a normal stream in that area. This is a picture of the upper headwater reach, which would be above 99. It doesn't look like what you would consider a stream. It looks more like a wetland area. However, the FEMA study goes up to 99, which the section of the stream where the FEMA study stops is just below this, and it doesn't really. When you think of I'm going to look at a stream, you don't expect to see this type of habitat. You expect to see actually a stream channel bottom. Between 96 and 99, the stream looks more like a flat rock section. Because of the rock in the area, the stream actually widens rather than cuts down. Most streams naturally, when you don't have a hard rock bottom, move down instead of out. But wherever you have a hard rock bottom stream, your stream is going to move out. Therefore, your floodplain is going to be a lot wider and shallower. When we get down to about 96, it starts taking on characteristics of what we would consider a true stream. And then, of course, when it converges with Overall, this is what it looks like, a much more characteristically expected stream in that area. So just in doing our stream assessment or classification, there were multiple Roskin classifications because of the type, the difference of the stream in different sections, especially the hard rock bottom. And that bedrock, while it's natural in that area, does cause some interesting, I'm not sure if we would call it issues, but things that we have to take into consideration in managing the floodplain around that stream and in managing that stream. You get a lot of stream widening if you take a look at the floodplain in that area, considering the amount of drainage area coming to the stream in those areas. It's very wide. And you have a braided channel in those areas, which means you don't have one central channel, but you have several sections of stream that come back together. The stream is in good condition given the type of stream that you have and the different classifications in different areas. We had good water quality in the areas where the stream was flowing. The stream goes dry quite a bit as well because of sinkholes. Yes, sir.
Does the stream flow continuously? Is there a spring that feeds it, or does it dry up periodically, or portions of it dry up periodically?
It's dry quite a bit. This was in the fall when we had quite a bit of rain, and we found the majority of it was dry. And in fact, you don't have a constantly flowing stream until you get somewhere around 96. Okay, so between 99 and 96, you have intermittent. You have areas of where the stream disappears. I wouldn't call it a spring as much, just that the stream disappears and reappears through rock fissures. So managing the stream system itself is different in this type of geology, of course. So one of the other things we were to do was to look at built-out conditions versus existing conditions in the watershed. And built-out, of course, has to be, you have to take in huge assumptions on growth, on land use, the urban growth boundary, all of those things. So the first thing we did was determine existing land use. And with existing land uses, we used the aerial photos and zoning, basically, to determine what the existing land use is within the watershed. And then we broke it down into what we called 3 different sub-watersheds within our overall watershed. One, the watershed that where the drainage area right now is within the city boundaries. 2, the watershed that is outside of the city boundaries but within the county and the urban growth boundary. And then 3, the watershed that's in the county but outside of the urban growth boundary. And began to do some pollutant load modeling using an EPA model for pollutant load estimating called the STEP L program. And there's a reason it's called that. I can't recall it right now, but it is a EPA accepted model. It's gross loading. It is not fine-tuning on each possible development site or in each possible area, but it's gross loading to give you an understanding of comparisons of different land use opportunities or options. And so the N loading, that's nitrogen loading in pounds per year. P loading is phosphorus, and then sediment loading. So that gives you kind of a baseline of where we are right now. And our goal should be, as we're moving forward, to manage our pollutant loads at that level or lower. And then that should maintain Puckett Creek as an unimpaired stream with good water quality. And then we used built-out conditions, and we had to make some assumptions here. We used the urban growth boundary, existing zoning, and then some growth projections by the Tennessee Advisory Commission on intergovernmental relations. That growth projection basically stated that Rutherford County would grow 18% in a 5-year period from 2010 to 2015. And so we projected that into the urban growth boundary, or actually the urban growth boundary was full build out, and outside the urban growth boundary was assumed to grow at 18%. A few traffic corridors along major traffic areas, Manson Pike, Highway 99, 96, and the Southwest Loop, as all of those are either fully in, or just partially in the Puckett Creek watershed. Our projected inloading, you can see down at the bottom, that is with best management practices, not without. So you'll see that we've lowered it. And so I'll talk about the best management practices in just a moment. But the goal here, if you recall, is to keep our pollutant loading levels that we have identified here as existing to that load or less. And so with best management practices, we're able to drop our nitrogen loading, phosphorus loading, and sediment loading with development still occurring at an 18%. And all of this is, of course, some pretty major assumptions. But it shows that we are able to develop in a manner that hopefully will not cause an impairment to the stream. We also did our H&H model, hydrology and hydraulics, really looking at the floodplain data and trying to understand how development in the scenario that we had projected for future growth, how that may impact the floodplain elevations in Puckett Creek. We had to develop a hybrid model based upon the existing data that was out there. We didn't create new data. We did manipulate the existing data that we had. And there were a few findings that we found that were quite interesting. One, the FEMA data doesn't match Puckett in the field, which means the FEMA studies that were done for revising or updating sections or portions of Puckett Creek did not take everything into consideration that's in Puckett Creek. There are at least 2 crossings that were not in the model, and that can impact your base flood elevation for your 100-year and your 500-year floodplain. Yes, sir.
With that being said, what is the potential? Like we had this past May, what is the potential of having problems in this area? And the reason I asked that question, that's right smack dab in the middle of my county commissioner district.
You have, well, if you look at that last bullet there, the average rise of the floodplain with the scenario using the data that we had was a 1/2 foot rise with that 18% growth. And that's average, on average. There's some areas that had a higher floodplain elevation, higher than a 1/2 foot over what's on the floodplain maps, and some that were lower than a 1/2. But on average, it was a 1/2 foot. So there is the potential. Again, this is a model, and it's based upon the data that was already there. Our recommendation would be that when FEMA comes around to restudy streams and asks you what streams need to be restudied, Puckett would definitely be one that we ask for restudying on. Because it appears that the data that is in the model is somewhat inaccurate. Not totally, but somewhat inaccurate, and it can cause a fluctuation in that.
So there are some potential where some of these developments could be placed into the 100-year floodplain where there may not be right now.
Yes. Yep. And so here's our potential floodplain impact. Rutherford County's regulations are much more conservative when it comes to the floodplain, which is a good thing. Your structures are 3 feet above the 100-year flood elevation. That's the requirement. Murfreesboro's is 1 foot above or at for non-residential structures. So Murfreesboro has the potential for greater damage than the county development does.
Say it again now.
Murfreesboro's requirement for the finished floor elevation has to be 1 foot above the 100-year flood elevation. And so if we're saying that there is a potential for a rise of 6 inches over what is there now, right now we have less of a margin of error. There's only 6 inches. And so over time, if development changes, you could definitely be impacting, you could experience flooding in the residential buildings in the city of Murfreesboro. In the county, you're 3 feet above. So you are less likely, if you've been built to county standards, to have inundation of your first floor, your first finished floor, okay? Because you have more, it's a good thing about having the 3 feet above BFE. Right. The 100-foot floodplain elevation. You have quite a bit of elevation to have as a margin of safety, rather than what the city has as 1 foot. Yes.
In your studies area-wide, we've had some changes in the 100-year floodplain, over the years.
Right.
Are they in your opinion, are they inaccuracies of the initial studies, or are they man-made, or both? Or
I'd say it's probably a combination of both, but as development builds, as you continue to develop and put impervious surfaces on the ground, you're going to have more stormwater runoff. And so while we typically see stormwater management on a development by development basis, that doesn't take into consideration the total impact to the stream floodplain. Many communities, Nashville, and I'm sure other communities, but I've been involved with some floodplain studies and master plans for the city of Nashville. If you do a master plan on a stream, you understand if I do detention on this development and detention on this development, how does it impact the timing and the flood in the stream that both of them discharge into. That's called a master plan for floodplain master plan. That's the only way you can truly understand where detention is needed and where detention is not needed. There are times when it's better not to have any detention on your project and go ahead and let that water get off of your project because of the timing. It's a little technical there, but yeah.
What are some measures that we as a planning commission and as a county can do to help alleviate or keep from happening?
To mitigate some of these stormwater
problems, yes.
Yep. Excellent question. Let's talk about the BMP plan. And we did not go in and actually do a master plan for floodplain management. That was not that wasn't under the scope. But it's definitely one of the recommendations would be to consider doing a floodplain master plan on Puckett Creek. Because of the uniqueness of that area as well, you have a lot of sinkholes. And you have that bedrock bottom that sends your stream out rather than down. And so your floodplain widens just as much as it increases in elevation. So we identified 8 potential areas for the application of BMPs. This is a conceptual plan. We didn't go in and identify is there too much rock in this area and therefore it makes it cost prohibitive. But these are good opportunities where you can get both a pollutant benefit and you could also get some detention benefit as well. I'll go quickly through those. Blackman High, this is towards the mouth of the stream as it comes in with overall. Blackman High School this is Blaze Drive that you'll see kind of crossing the picture. And the blue back there, the plain blue is the deeper blue without the cross-hatching is the 100-year. The lighter blue is the 500-year floodplain elevation. The cross-hatching is the floodway. So that gives you an idea of kind of what you're looking at. If we had a potential wetland located in this area or developed a wetland in this area, you could get both detention from the development that's occurred on the other side of the street, which would be the middle school, plus potentially some of the high school, and also some of the development that's occurred in that Blackman area on that side. Estimated costs are given based upon the impervious area treated, so this is very conceptual, but you do get a good pollutant reduction capability, and you do also have the potential to work in detention on a sub-regional basis. This is what the area looks like right now. When it rains, that water does back fully almost up to the sidewalk there. You've got a good long area in there, which is what you need. You need surface area for the pollutant removal. Second potential is a wetland or a detention system at 96. 96 is the road that is kind of at the north of your picture. What's the name of that development? Swanson is the development kind of over on the left. You've got the old Blackman Volunteer Fire Station building there and that little piece that is not in the floodplain. And the two yellow blocks are the areas where you could potentially do some detention and treatment. The top block, there's an awful lot of rock in that area. When you take a look at the soils maps, there's a lot of rock in that area, so that may not be the best location. It would get quite a bit of treatment in that area. The lower basin would probably be the most feasible. One of the best things you can do for both protecting the stream corridor itself and also protecting the floodplain and the floodway is to create riparian areas along your stream. The riparian area is just a dense planting of vegetation. It's almost a setback, not a takings, but a setback from that stream where you have deep-rooted vegetation other than grass. A lot of the areas along here have are manicured down to the stream, so the landowners who own down to the stream can actually see the stream, and that causes problems over time with stream instability, and also a lot of high maintenance in that area removes your canopy over the stream, which is also a positive for water quality. So this yellow area, generally speaking, is the area that we would recommend to do some riparian area enhancement that doesn't give you any detention, but it does give you water quality. We estimated about $100 per linear foot, and we've got about 1,500 linear feet in that area. This is what the floodway and floodplain look like in this area. This is between 96 and 99, back behind not Evergreen Farms, but the subdivision that's north of that. So you've got quite a bit of floodplain and floodway that is the back portion of those lots. This is what a back section looks like, and where you see the edge of the house and moving towards the back where you see that very rear line of trees. There's one line of trees and then the stream channel, what would be considered the stream channel. Not a very full riparian buffer at all. This is behind the Evergreen Farms and development that's occurring down in that area. This is Perlino and Cornerstone. There is, you can see an old, I wouldn't say it's a detention area or a pond. It's probably more of a man-made depression that has water in it back there. There's been a lot of construction activity here. There's a stream crossing back in here that isn't reflected in the FEMA models. Riparian area enhancement would be great back here. There's a lot of rock, so it has to be very, very specific vegetation to be installed back in this area because you have a very thin layer of soil, and then you hit rock. but you would have a good pollutant removal in this area. Again, you have a wide floodway and floodplain. If you think about this being, if you have a flat, hard rock area and you have more water coming down in there, the water is going to move out, which is what you see with the wide floodway. Typically, you don't see such a wide floodway, but there is a very wide floodway because the stream can't go anywhere but out rather than down. And this is an area where it's dry. During our assessments, we were out in this area probably 3 times, and there is not a flowing stream in this area. It disappears and it reappears. So it's easy to look at that area and not understand that there's a stream out there. One of the other areas, the circled red area, is one of the stream crossings that was not in the FEMA model. There's probably 10 culverts installed in that stream crossing there for crossing back and forth. Detention would be good in this area. There is no detention coming down in here, but it may not be feasible because of the rock. You've got a lot of rock, and also some outlet protection at a stormwater conveyance right there towards the bottom. There's a large RCP that discharges right in there, and it's scoured all the way down to the stream channel itself. On the other side, on the west side of the stream, if you go back a little north towards 96, your soils are much better on the west side of the stream than they are on the east side of the stream. On the east side of the stream, you've got a lot of rock. On the west side, you have deeper soils, and that's where you should try to mitigate some of the stormwater discharges that are hitting the stream. You could either do a detention or a wetland in this area based upon the soils. Either one of those can give you, you can either get full detention regionally, or you can get moderate detention with your wetland. Wetland gives you good pollutant removal, but so does a wet detention system. Here's where your floodplain and floodway are. You'd be out of the floodway and on the edge of the floodplain in that area. The Muirwood area down below that, doing some riparian enhancement along the stream and that end would also be beneficial. We identified about 1,200 linear feet that could use enhancement, again at a cost of $100 per linear foot estimated. Doesn't give you the detention, but it does give you water quality and stream corridor protection. Again, here's your floodway and floodplain. So we're all in that area. And the last one, the headwaters of Puckett are more like a linear wetland system than they are a stream at the very headwaters. So this is Old Salem, which is the northern road, and the blue road is 99. So we're right in that that crook, and that area in there. The floodplain, the detailed flood study stops at Old Salem, and so you have an estimated floodplain elevation for anything above that. This area is frequently inundated with water. You've got Armstrong Branch that comes in there as well. A wetland system in this area would do great to protect stream water quality. You may even be able to do an offline detention system in this same area. Here is the floodplain for that area. It's fairly inundated for the majority of the year, or for the majority of your storms. So just kind of a summary of what we found with our plan. Puckett Creek, of course, does have good water quality and habitat, considering the type of stream it is and the different types, classifications of stream that you have going through the stream system. The general recommendations would be to develop, first to develop a master plan to try to push development outside of your floodplain as much as possible, but the floodplain's fairly wide in that area. To maintain riparian areas along the stream, to protect the stream corridor, but also in areas, especially between 96 and 99, where it does not appear to be a stream, just looking at it from a homeowner's eyes, you're also creating a setback from the stream channel itself. Implement some of these BMPs, however, a more detailed study would be necessary to understand the detention needs and your floodplain management needs in the area as well. and also the feasibility of each one of those since we have so much rock in the watershed. And maintain forest, one of the things we found in looking at the growth, the forested area outside of the urban growth boundary is definitely a positive because it protects the headwater infiltration amounts. And manage growth inside the urban growth boundary, of course, using the stormwater management practices that you all have at this point. And just a final note, if the stream does become impaired and TDEC identifies it as an impaired stream, then your stormwater permit and requirements have to be adjusted to meet, and more of your staff time has to be adjusted to meet the requirements that come with an impaired stream and the higher regulations that go with that.
I got a question.
Yes,
I
sir.
guess my question would be for Doug and or Dale. In the comprehensive plan committee that's going on now, are some of these measures, or can some of these measures be placed into our new plan when it comes up?
Well, I think both of us can comment toward this. The the state's come out with a new stormwater ordinance. It's a draft one. We just got a hold of it a couple weeks ago, and we Doug and the guys met with the contractor on the comprehensive plan. I believe it was last Thursday. I was at a meeting with FEMA, but at that time, Todd Sullivan, representing us, took the new ordinance to them, and because we have to incorporate that into our stormwater regulations. The contractor recommended that in the comprehensive plan, you refer to the stormwater ordinance, and then the stormwater ordinance would incorporate these types of BMPs into the ordinance itself. Would be requirements for the development to be carried out.
Some of these BMPs are more regional in nature than they are, well, all of these BMPs would be more regional in nature than they would be specific development related to a specific development. So, for example, the city with their stormwater utility and the fees that are associated with that could use those fees to start some of these BMPs. And then, you know, depending on where it's located and the treatment that's provided, you could get some benefit from that as well.
I will say that in the future, we're probably going to have to do a similar type study on all the streams in the county at one time or another. So we've been able to, through the Watershed Association, we've been able to get a couple of those. They worked on Lytle Creek, and then they worked on Puckett. Now we've been able to utilize that stuff. But as we get into some of the other creeks there, if it becomes necessary for us to do the studies, then there'll be a requirement to, you know, of course, get more money and fund it. Those BMPs that she talked about, most of them are in the city. But the way we're handling in the county right now is we're trying to do the BMPs in development. We haven't done anything specifically outside, mainly because we have a limited crew, and then we don't have, you know, very much funding in that toward that area. Our little public works crew is a 3-man crew, which mainly using for cleaning out ditches and ponds and trying to keep what the existing infrastructure we have. There's be some new requirements in the stormwater coming up. There's going to have to be some new maintenance agreements for perpetuity, which we've thought about signing those to the homeowner association. Of course, the problem we have with homeowner association is they're established when they register the subdivisions, but a lot of them are not effective. And so even though that the facilities are assigned to the homeowner association, after a period of time they either become silted in or the trees grow in them or whatever, and that's the types of stuff that our crews are trying to handle, our little 3-man crew. And so it's going to become more of a challenge as time goes on meeting these requirements.
Well, I know it's been about 5 years since, maybe a little bit longer, since we implemented. I say we, the county commission, implemented the public works department.
Right.
At some point, we knew that department is going to have to, with these type of things coming on board, and the avenue as far as fixing some of these other problems, and then we had the flood. We're going to have to make some changes, and it's going to have to grow to meet the demand as far as our flooding problems and the potential flooding problems for the future. So, I mean, I think right now we're only putting 2 cents per.
It's down to 1 cent. We started out at $0.015, and
Yeah.
it was reduced to 1 penny.
Yeah, 1.5 down to, now it's down to 1. because there's a lot of areas in this county that have got water problems, and we found out there's even more. And I know you and Eric and and Todd and all can vouch for it. We found out in May that there's even more, and you know, we've got to address those issues.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dale, and Gary, this, I'll say this to you since you brought that up. Does this not give more credence and need to revisit a stormwater quality fee for county residents to help pay for some of these state mandated regulations and fix some of the repairs that are so badly needed? Does that not set up, because that's the only way you can fund some of this, is through a stormwater quality fee?
Yeah, we did a proposal from the office for the fee in the last budget cycle. And it was determined at that time that there was a need for it.
You said there was or was not a need?
Was not a need for the fee, that we would handle it through the current 1 cent. I think as the requirements become more specific and we get into these later in this fiscal year, I think next winter we'll have to address that again, because these types of BMPs are going to be necessary for us to meet the requirements that the requirements are coming down from the federal government. They pass it down to the state, and the state passes it on down to us. And of course, nobody passes money along with it.
That's
they
right.
just tell you have to do it. So it's one of those mandates that gets everybody kind of upset. But the fact is, you still have to do it. So we will probably have to revisit that this coming funding cycle.
Well, and refresh my memory. As residents in the city, don't we pay a stormwater fee on our water and sewer bill?
I think it's $325 or $350 every month. I live in the city also, but my water's through CUD, but the fee is on my bill also.
Right, but
So-
do county residents pay that fee?
County do not pay that fee.
Okay, but we're talking about needs for the county at this point,
That's correct.
and
Right.
and fixes of stormwater that are, in my opinion, badly overdue. So I guess I'm just throwing this out there to remind everybody, you can call it a tax, you can call it whatever you want to, but you have to have the money to implement the demands from the state regulations. And I don't really see any other way to do that but to extend that city fee to the residents of the county too. And it's, like you just said, it's like less than $4 a month for a residential. And not only does that pay for some of this program, but also to build and create new infrastructure issues.
What's the difference in having it on the water bill versus having it on the tax rate? I mean, it's just hiding it. You put it on the water bill. Is that a flat rate, or is that calculated according to the amount of roof area and things like that?
What they do is they calculate what's called an equivalent. I think in the city it's 3,200 feet. If you have that much of impervious surface, then you have one equivalent. Okay.
A lot of businesses
all the
now get hit
resident-
pretty hard.
Yeah, the businesses, the schools, the commercials, if they've got 16,000 square feet of impervious surface, that's divided by 3,200, and then you have paid so many fees, 8 times whatever, 350, they pay that per month. Our school system is one of the largest contributors to the city's stormwater fee. All of our school system pays these fees, and of course, there you got all the parking lots and the buildings and stuff that you pay, so our stormwater bill is quite large. And it's the same way with any kind of industrial complex or a Kroger or a Publix or something where you got the large parking lot and all that you pay. The residents pay just basically one unit, if you will, for each. And the way you would go into the GIS and you would come up with a typical impervious unit.
In the county, a lot of people live larger lots, longer driveways, paved or concreted driveways. They have an outbuilding or two, and that $3.50 could become $15 or $20 per month for some of those people. Because I've heard some people live in the city that have, even farmers are in the city, or something. They're part of their farm in the city, and they get hit pretty hard for a barn or something like that. So I think we ought to.
Well, when you establish
Careful how far we into
when
that.
you establish the fee, you establish the way you want to handle it. In other words, so you can handle it so that everybody gets treated the same type of thing. I mean, you can handle that in the way you set up the fee itself. So,
I'd interject also that once we do these, once anybody does these watershed plans, then you are eligible for cost share money from the Department of Ag through their 319 grant program. It's a grant program, and you have to apply. There's a cost share of 40 to 60. 60% would be the Department of Ag, and 40% could be in kind or however with whoever is doing the BMPs. But once you identify these BMPs, you then are eligible for those funds on a competitive basis. So there are some funds out there that can't be on a development by development application, but they can be more regional in nature in order to protect the stream, not to meet your MS4 permit requirements or your stormwater permit requirements. So, anything else? Thank y'all.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone else have questions? Dale, any more comments?
No.
Okay. You referring to stormwater treatment county-wide.
That's what they're talking about. Every square foot of impervious surface. No barn out there in the lot, you're gonna get hit for $7 or $8 a month or something.
Stormwater fee county-wide or stormwater fee in these areas we're studying, or we would do the, we're talking about now.
well, the fee itself would be in unincorporated areas. If we talk about us doing something, these particular projects, some of these would be strict in the city, some in the county, some of them have to work together. There is a move by EPA to require these stormwater programs to be done on a watershed basis. Right now, we do it on a MS4 basis, or like we have a county MS4. Smyrna and Laverne and Murfreesboro got their own MS4 that they do their own thing. If they were to go, say, to a watershed basis, there would be we'd have to somehow get everybody to cooperate to do it jointly. And what we try to do is we meet with the other MS4s in the county on a quarterly basis. Our office and their office meet, and the things that we do stormwater-wide, we try to pass the same thing through all the entities, so we're all doing the same types of things at the same time. Now, right now, because they've all have their stormwater fee, they're able to do these types of projects more available. I'll give you an example. When we had the flood in May 1st and 2nd, well, on Monday, Murfreesboro was able to use their stormwater fees to get a contractor to go out on Tuesday and overfly the areas that were flooded. What they did is they flew over the urban growth boundary. So we have photos of all the water flooding at that time. The photos that the city got, there were a few additional photos outside of the city that were in the county that I was able to get with OIT, and we're purchasing those. So we were able to use that data to establish, new floor elevations and stuff for structures that are going to areas that are not in the floodplain but do get flooded because of either sinkholes or where they're located and that kind of stuff. But with them having that fee money available at that point in time, they were immediately to set that up and get that information. Whereas if I'd have tried to do it through our system, I had to go through 2 or 3 committees, and it'd be taken a couple of months to get it approved, and of course the water would be gone a long time before you can get that type of information. That's just an example of how it's utilized.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, Doug. Submitted for preliminary plat approval, Malibu Estates.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. At Malibu Estates, it's 118 lots on 69.14 acres located along Barfield Crescent Road. Zoning is R15, and Park Trust is the developer. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Corbett.
Malibu Estates, of course, was before us with a different developer. That developer eventually ran into financial problems, and now Boyd Park just taken over and brought it back to us. The same drainage challenges are there that were before. They're still going to be required to put in a couple of box culverts, one along Barfield Crescent, and then I think the other one's along Webb Road to handle the water. There's some additional stormwater regulations they've had to meet since they brought it back in, and we've worked those out with the engineer. And so there's some additional stuff that they're doing in there. But based on all this, it meets our requirements, Mr. Chairman.
All right, questions?
I've got one.
Sure.
I know I spoke to Jamie the other day about this. This is in my commission district, and I know I've in the past, what, 2 years? Has it been 2 years ago?
This was
been
brought
three.
forth
2 or
about,
3 years.
yeah.
No,
About 3
close to
years.
4 actually.
The judge approved it in '07.
Yeah. I know we had some neighbors come up here, and I mean, and I've seen it myself where there are some flooding problems out there. And I know we went through litigation in the past, and we know the outcome of that, of what happened. The judge ruled it, you know, in their favor. You know, I want the citizens out there protected on the flooding. And I think from what Jamie's told me that they've done everything, and you're saying that you've looked at it. I just hope and pray on behalf of those citizens out there, and I know we've got somebody here today that lives out there, and I talked to some more of them, but that it takes care of the flooding issues out there. So
Now, let me address that just a little bit, Mr. Farley. What we look at is the water coming from this particular development. There are other flooding issues in that area
right,
that won't be addressed by this development. Okay?
right.
I just want to make sure that we
I'm
all,
talking about this area here that flood. I'm talking about the area.
you're talking about just the subdivision
Yes,
itself.
yes.
Right.
And it's not supposed to make it any worse for anybody.
That's
that lives
correct.
now. Better or at least the same.
It should be better. I think it'd be a little bit better, but it should be at least the same.
I have a question. On the, if I remember correctly, on the original plan, they were going to be taking care, those developers, the original developers were going to be taking care of like box culverts, I guess a couple of places down from where this, are the new developers going to do that same plan?
Yeah, that's still in the plan.
Now, from what I'm understanding, when I met with Jamie the other day with this, everything that they said they would do, go the extra
Initially.
mile, they're still willing to do that. Because that question was already asked.
Okay, any other questions? Have a motion.
I make a motion, we approve it.
Have a second. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I need to pass on the vote.
You pass?
I need to pass.
Yep. Okay. Waldron Farm, Section 5, Phase 2.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you stated, Waldron Farm, Section 5, Phase 2, it's 79 lots on just a shade over 41 acres. It's zoned R15 with a conditional use permit for a planned residential development. It's located to the west of Shelbyville Pike and to the north of Stones River Road. Joseph M. Waldron is the developer, SEC is the engineer, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Fuller.
Again, this was approved earlier as a planned development. When they brought it back in, we had them redesign this a little bit with the detention areas to meet the new stormwater regulations and new stormwater requirements. And so it meets our requirements, Mr. Chairman.
Was this the area that had the neighbor that we had discussion about a berm and all? Is all
Yeah,
that?
if you'll notice, it's in the drawing, the berm is in the drawing.
Okay,
Burns
all
just
that-
like it was.
Just
There
like
was- just like it was, we had talking about the timetable, who was gonna do the berm, if it's gonna be individually per house and stuff, so all that's, the same thing we worked out is still all in place.
Yes. The main difference is we had them redo some of the detention areas because of the new regs as far as, right now they have to, before they didn't have to treat for water quality, now basically that means they have to hold the water from a 1.5 inch rain in that pond for, I think it's 48 hours to allow any sediment to settle out before the water's released. And you do that by doing a smaller orifice, and there's a couple other things we're doing in there to meet those requirements.
What
Yep.
was,
Go ahead.
what was the reason it was brought back up? Is there any changes in lots or anything? Or just the water?
It had expired.
It expired.
Expired,
Right.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, we had a pretty extensive meeting on that about the buffering already.
Yeah, Mr. Barnhill,
Yeah.
that's his property back there, and, because he had called me and asked me, he wanted some extra buffering and stuff back there because of cattle and different
We
things.
had a lot of discussion
Yeah.
about when it was gonna be built per lot or whatever. As long as it's all the same.
So it meets all requirements?
Yes.
And the only thing different is the water part is being brought up to our
That's
code
correct.
now.
The water part is being treated differently.
The conservation easement that's shown here, who maintains it, who owns it after this is all built out? Does it go per lot that adjoins it, or
What page are you on?
4 or 10?
That's common space, and any common space in these will be maintained by the homeowner association. Now, we get back into what we were talking about earlier. They're establishing a homeowner association. As long as it's operable, that'll work. What's happened in the past is they have not, and then we get into David having to cut it under the tall grass ordinance, or our public works crew having to go in there and maintain it. So the plan is for the homeowner association to have to maintain these common spaces.
Is this a wet area or just a donated common space?
It's an area that when they have a lot of runoff, water will fill that area up. It's not it might be an intermittent stream, but it's not a continuous stream, but it is a runoff area for that, plus upstream for that quite a bit.
Okay, any other questions?
And going back to what Dale just said, I mean, we're seeing a lot of this right here where the homeowner association are going away, and it's falling back up on the county. Or a lot of it, if the neighbors out there would, some of them will cut it themselves, some of them won't.
Yeah, that's one of the problems we're having. And we're addressing it slowly with the public works crew. Is you'll have an area like this, or maybe a ditch lines put in there, and after 10 years, you may have neighbor A and D and F who it'll be perfectly cleaned out, but the ones next to them won't do anything to it. You may have trees in there that are 4 or 6 inches in diameter, so the water can go to a certain point and it'll back up because of what's in there.
Same is true for any retention area, though.
That's correct. Same thing.
A common area like a playground or anything.
Now, there's in the future, EPA again, and some of their stormwater stuff are going to start requiring, and I'm sure they'll require the state, and they'll send it down to us, that there's some kind of maintenance agreement signed, and there's a draft one attached to the back of this ordinance I was telling you about, that for maintenance on these things in perpetuity. And so, we're going to have to, as a commission, we'll have to probably have a work session and figure out how we're going to handle that type of requirement that's coming
A
down to
maintenance
us.
agreement with each homeowner?
Well, that's, we got to have it somehow. Either that or the county just have to adopt all these things when they're accepted, and we'll have to do it all ourselves. And that's coming within the next year. I think that maintenance agreement has to be within the next year.
On these retention areas, I think of a lot of them. What's the best management practice there? If the county works has to go in there and do them, do they keep them cut low, or do they need some grass in there for some filter? Or
well, the grass helps. Any plants you have in there will soak up some water. You can plant some types of trees in there, but if you can't have it clogged up, so it does have to be maintained in such a way that the out and the inlet's not clogged up. We've got a couple areas like the Big Sandia subdivision out on Shores Road that had some water problems. If you go back and look at their detention area, which the main homeowner association is supposed to maintain, well, they got it fenced, but nobody's done anything in there since the subdivision was built. I mean, the trees are huge. You can't even get back in there to look at it. So. And
there's also been, I know I've had calls from different places, but people go in and been cutting trees down, or a tree may fall and they cut it down, and they're throwing all the limbs and they're piling up in there, and water starts blocking up, and
it becomes a place to dump your brush.
Right.
So does your office get notified, or is there some type of auditing process?
What we're doing is we're handling projects basically as people call us. Okay, we've got a problem. We have a priority list. There's probably 100 names on that priority list. The higher priority projects are one where you have chance of property damage or life and safety type of stuff. Those go high, and then you go back and then you try to do the ones that will affect the most people. The challenge is if you have a very large project, you have to go to where the water comes out, and work your way back. And I'm going to give you an example of where we're having a challenge there. We've got up on Old Nashville Highway, there's a bunch of subdivisions in there. They're old subdivisions built back in the 60s, 70s. The ditches all need to be cleaned out, but they all drain down to where they go underneath a pipe under the railroad. Okay, the pipe on the railroad is 36 inches. It's not big enough to handle all that water. We've tried to work with the railroad, and they've helped us some by doing some maintenance, but the answer is to probably enlarge that pipe or put another one. Well, it's very difficult to get any kind of permission from the railroad to work under their tracks. In addition to that, you didn't have to go under Highway 41, the one that goes to Smyrna, which is 4 lanes. You could have to drill under there, and eventually it would then go into the river. But you're talking to solve the outlet part of that project, you're talking several $100,000. So we can clean out the old ditches down to that point, but when they reach that 36-inch pipe, they're still going to back up. They'll have a little more capacity, and we've gone in and cleaned out about 5 or 6 ponds in that area. Clean out ditches. We still have some people who get water in their places because the water absorbs all the extra capacity. It can't get out the pipe, and then it starts backing up. So the challenge is not just cleaning out the ditch, but knowing where the water's going at that point, so you don't create a problem for your neighbor down the stream a ways.
Okay, any other questions? Have a motion. Motion to approve. Motion to approve. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed no. Motion carries. Submitted for site plan approval, Bradley Plumbing.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is Bradley Plumbing. It's located along Flat Rock Road, the west side. The applicant received a conditional use permit to operate a plumbing business from the Board of Zoning Appeals back in May of this year. The original plan that they had actually submitted to us was an administrative plan. They were just going to make an addition to the building, and it was small enough that it met the criteria for administrative review. They've rethought that and are proposing instead to go with a couple of portable storage units on the property, which you are seeing on the site plan. Basically, the comments, there were several comments that were made regarding the site plan. The engineer has met those comments. The only comment really, and I don't necessarily say this is outstanding, but the field line areas and the septic tank location varied a little bit from the original plan to the one that was submitted. Of course, the subsurface folks will have to sign off on this plan to make sure that there's enough space, minimum 10 foot between the tank and the field areas and the storage buildings. But besides that, the plan appears to be in good order, Mr. Chairman.
All right, questions on this?
They're just adding 2 storage containers basically to the building that's already there.
Yeah.
Motion to approve.
Second. Motion approved. Do I have a second? Do I have a second? Second. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed no. Motion carries. Industrial forklift.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is a piece of property located on the west side of Shelbyville Pike to the south of Midland Fosterville Road. The property was zoned transportation back in September of 1999, and a conditional use permit for industrial equipment storage was granted by the Board of Commissioners in June of 2010. Planning Commission members probably remember this zoning coming through. The property will be used for the storage of forklifts, backhoes, trailers, those kind of things. There will not be an office on site, and the BZA has granted a variance for gravel parking. Again, there were a number of comments that were made on this. The first page of that plan is just the existing conditions. The second and third page really are the site plan and the landscaping plan. To refer you to that. Really, the comments that were made, again, there were several that were made. The engineer has pretty much met the requirements that we have placed on there. The only concern that I have really is the fence that's being proposed to be used. It's a privacy fence, but it's not really. It's not like a wood or plank type fence. It's a chain link with the slats in it. I think that needs to be revisited, but other than that, everything else appears to be in order with the plan. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So you want the fence changed?
Yeah, that just when we're talking about, especially for screening and buffering purposes, I mean, it really talks more about like a wood masonry type fence as opposed to chain link and the slats. It doesn't really make provision for that.
Looks a little bit more of a commercial type, like not fitting in a residential area very well.
Right.
Like a junkyard or something.
Okay, fencing from where to where? All the way around?
Well, really, it's you can kind of see it. It's on the south side, and I guess that would be the east portion of the east side. On the back side and on the north side, it's actually abutting some property that's zone transportation as well. And on the back side, there's plenty of screening back there that even if I don't think you'd be able to see it from adjacent property to begin with. So
I'm still confused. Where does it?
you can kind of, if you look on the plan, I guess that'd be it'd be the south side where you see the large tree right there, and then a portion of the east side going up that area.
So wherever it says 6-foot privacy fence.
In that area, right. Mm-hmm.
Is there a representative here? Could
Yeah, I believe
talk
there is.
about
You,
the
you,
plan?
you're talking about from the highway all the way back to the.
No.
No.
He's just talking about on the south side of the property.
Okay.
Where the line with all the little X's are.
Right.
Okay.
That's your 6-foot privacy.
Yeah, they're not
fence.
really disturbing any area further up, so that's not really a
And then it
requirement.
basically wraps, there's a gate there at the driveway, and then it wraps to the
driveway.
tree line.
Doug, is this the same one that they didn't have a set number of how many pieces of material? I mean,
When it came out, yeah, and I think the recommendation that came out of Planning Commission was 50, if I remember correct. And then when it got to the County Commission, the recommendation actually went down to, or the requirement went down to 30. So.
And Doug, does the sign meet the sign ordinance?
Well, the
signs that
location, we asked them to put that on there. Now, approval of the site plan does not constitute approval of the sign.
Okay.
We asked them to put that on there because we do want to see the location. From the location of it, looking at this, it looks like it'd be okay. It's far enough from the right-of-way. Now, we'll still need to make sure that the size meets requirement. There's a separate approval process for that, so.
Bill, are you gonna address the privacy fence?
Yes, sir. Bill Huddleston, Huddleston Steel Engineering. Good morning. Just talked with Ron Venata, the developer of the project. He said he could go with a wood fence or a vinyl fence instead of the chain link.
That's fine.
What's your wishes?
Either way, it's fine.
Well-
Either way, it would work either way with vinyl. I wouldn't necessarily condition it one way or another. Just what they have would need to change, and they'll just meet our requirements from there. That would be
Okay.
fine.
Okay. Is everybody, you okay with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And do you want them to show the sign location on the plat?
It's already on there.
already on.
Yeah, it's there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Meets everything, okay?
Motion approved.
Motion approved, I have a second. Got a second. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. St. Patrick's Anglican Church.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is a piece of property located on the west side of Baker Road. It's right at the intersection of Baker and Bass Road. The request is for a 3,500 square foot worship center, along with the remodeling of an existing house for administrative and other church uses, which brings the square footage total to a little over 5,400 square feet. This plan is for the first phase of the development. This plan is in several different pages. I would refer you to the site plan, which is on, the overall site plan is on the, I guess that'd be the third page, sheet C 0.2. With any development of this size, of course, there was a number of comments that we had as staff. For the most part, the design engineer has met and addressed our comments. There were a couple of items that I do want to bring to the attention of the Planning Commission. One of them had to do with the location of the septic tank and field line areas. They are showing, and it's actually on, I think it's on the next page actually, they are showing a proposed location at this point for the septic tank area. They're still working, last I spoke with the design engineer, they're still working on the field line areas. So that those haven't been finalized yet. So that is an outstanding issue. The other issue had to do with the proposed height of the structure. They are showing building height information on on a different sheet, not the ones that we're looking at now. The steeple, of course, can encroach into the height limitation of 35 feet. Now, they have a measurement to the ridge line, which is a little over 35 feet. Based on our zoning, depending on the type of roof, it depends on where you actually measure the height to. So we would need to verify that before any permits were issued that did meet our requirement. But other than that, most of the other comments on here, as best I can tell, after reviewing the revisions, appear to have met the comments that we had. I'll turn it over to Mr. Corbett if you had any engineering or drainage comments. It was a pretty detailed plan.
No, we work with the engineer on this, and the drainage meets our requirement.
Okay.
And I believe that there are representatives of the church here this week.
Any other questions?
How big an issue are the field lines? I mean, are we just barely moving them, or
Well,
we
they're
don't
still
have a site yet? Or
yeah,
what?
they're still actually locating them. Is my understanding now. I don't think it would affect the
won't
location
affect
of
the
the
plan.
building or anything. You may want to speak to the design engineer. I believe. I don't know if he's present or not. But there's a representative here that can speak to that. So.
Well, if it ends up being a significant change, we'd have to come back.
That's
to it.
correct.
Yeah.
That's
Anyway,
correct.
so
Mhm.
if we just approve it and they meet the state's requirements, and it doesn't change anything, then we'll be okay with it.
Right. Yeah, if it could even shift the building just a little bit. We have a little bit of authority to grant what are called minor variations, but yeah, if it ended up the field lines are exactly where the building's located right now, and they had to completely move the building, then it would have to come back through your approval. That's correct.
And they are aware of the steeple height.
That is correct. There are. I mean, it's. When you look at the. It's a larger tract, probably similar to this, about the same size, about 7+ acres or so.
Off that parking lot.
Not that we're shown on the site plan. I mean, I don't think there's just one sitting right on it, but I don't have the aerial right in front of me, so I couldn't say for sure. But.
Our standard regulations will keep them from putting too much parking lot lighting on that area.
Well, actually,
anyway,
if you
will it
look
not?
at, yeah, and that, to bring that up, if you flip, there is a landscaping plan in here. It's toward the back. And of course, this is considered I mean, there are buffering
Which
requirements
page
for
you
this.
on?
And it's, well, it's the third from the back. It's L1. You can see they planted a number of trees up in that area.
Well, that should filter that light out.
Mhm.
going.
And actually, the very last page, actually, they do have a site lighting plan. They are showing just some small lights in the parking area, and you can see the foot candles there at the property line. I mean, when you're getting right at the property line, about one, maybe at its highest, at one or a couple points, 2-foot candle. That's just not a whole lot of light. So, and the glare and it filters out pretty good as you get onto the other side of the line there.
Three's a shopping center type lighting. So, but it looks like they're gonna cut it pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other questions?
Let me make a comment. Go ahead, Jeff.
This thing says phases, 1A, I believe in 1B.
Mhm.
Is there anything that shows what a master plan might look like?
We don't have the master plan at this point. Now, again, that's something that the applicant might be able to shed a little bit of light on. I don't know if they're really that far with it. I mean, I think they have some conceptual ideas, but we don't have the actual full plan at this point.
So all we're doing is approving somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,500 square feet.
Basically, and actually, like I said, the new building itself is 3,500. The remaining is just renovating the existing house on the property. So that I was including that as part of the square footage. So
anything else that relates
would
to
come back.
would have to come back.
That is correct.
Okay, Mike?
On the lighting issue, I came by, this is sort of related to what we were just talking about. Came by the Dollar General on Highway 99 Saturday night, and I thought the impact was minimal there. They did a good job of putting the lights down, so if we can adhere to those kind of standards, I think it's probably actually less than a homeowner with a security light.
Mm-hmm.
Appeared that away from the road anyway.
What are those lights, Richie, you know?
I hadn't been out there doing it. I mean, you can get a cutoff fixture that'll stop it. It'll go straight down.
Yeah, they had minimal light coming out the front windows and one on each side, probably one in the back, but they were very directed down towards the side of the building. I thought they did a good job. You know,
I think what there is a note on the lighting plan that it's a shoebox style light with flat glass on the bottom. The fixtures are directed downward, so I think that's probably the same that you're talking about, right?
I think it works really well.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Have a motion.
Let me just ask, this meets all of our requirements, and
Yes,
this is a use by right.
that's correct.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, staff reports. Amendment to zoning resolution. You go to the bond extension?
Yeah, if we could have a suspension of the rules. We did get a bond extension in after the agenda had already been printed, so if we could have a vote to
Have a
suspend the rules
motion
to consider
suspend the
that.
rules, so do the bond extension. Have a second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay, go ahead.
This bond extension for Creekside Estates, they're asking for a year's extension. It's mainly, they haven't built enough houses or sold enough to turn it over to the county yet, so we recommend approval on the extension.
This their first down.
Yes, sir.
Move to approve.
Second.
Have a motion second. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, Doug, staff report.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. The primary staff report we have is regarding a proposed amendment to the zoning resolution regarding pools in the accessory structure section. We've become aware in recent months that our regulations for pools might need a possible amendment. Pools are considered detached accessory structures and do count at this time toward the total square footage of allowable detached space as identified under our detached accessory structure standards, and we did put a copy of the standards in there with your agenda packets. The Board of Zoning Appeals does consider variances to the zoning resolution and has considered a number of variance requests to the total square footage, several of which deal with the fact of somebody wanting to put a pool on the property. After we've looked at how other communities regulate pools, what we're proposing to do is actually not count pools toward the allowable square footage, but still count them as part of the 20% maximum lot coverage. It looks there are some other areas around us that don't count pools. There are some that do, so either way, I think we'll be okay. But it seems that the variances that do go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for this reason are granted, and I don't know of any that have been denied. But again, we would include them as still a part of the maximum 20% lot coverage, but we just would not include them as part of the detached accessory structures, kind of similar to what we do for agricultural buildings and barns and those kind of things. There's a few other housekeeping amendments in there. If you look at the amendments that we're proposing, that's the primary one. But a couple other minor things that we're doing is under number 5, which is an example. Right now, the regulation says fences, wall, and hedges subject to the provisions of Section 13.08. Basically, what we'd propose to do is take out walls and hedges. And then on number 9, there's an item there where it says signs except advertising signs subject to the provisions of Article 20 of this resolution. Really don't know why the advertising signs are accepted there, so we would just strike that. I mean, that signs are all regulated under that provision anyway. There's really no exceptions to that. So that's really the other change. And then just moving on, again, just the walls and the hedges issue under bulk and location regulations. One other item, and I do want to bring this to your attention, is under use limitations. Right now, there's a requirement that no accessory structure is allowed on a lot prior to the construction of the principal structure. At this time, that would include fences as well. I'm sure that there are properties out there where people have built fences before they've built their house, or like a fence of an area or something like that. We went ahead and just put that in there as well under number 2 under use limitations, just taking fences out. So that would give somebody the permission to build a fence prior to the establishment of the principal structure on the property. If that's something you're comfortable with, then we can move all this forward. But again, these are really what I would consider more housekeeping type amendments. But I'll be happy to answer any questions that you would have on that.
And with the pool, with the 20% lot coverage, if they were going to infringe on that a little bit, that could still go to the BZA
That's correct.
Anyway.
That's correct.
This will make it a little bit more open for somebody to put their pool on. A little
That's
bit.
correct. Basically, what we're asking for at this point, this is really for discussion. We would have to have a public hearing with this at the Planning Commission. Now, at this time, we don't have any rezoning applications for the August meeting, the night meeting. So if you want, there's a couple options. We could go ahead and still have the August meeting with just this item on the agenda, or we could put this off and just advertise this for a public hearing at the next day meeting, because I don't anticipate this being controversial. In fact, I think most people will be happy that we're looking at doing this. So I'll leave that up to you. If you decide just to do it at the day meeting, then we just wouldn't have a night meeting in August. So
I think that sounds better.
I kind of had a feeling that maybe what you said.
This isn't a big rush where we have to get this done.
No, there's not. I mean, if you really wanted to, we could even push it off to September. But there's no reason we couldn't have a hearing on this at the daytime August meeting.
And all those issues you just mentioned need to be on a public hearing?
Yes.
Including the fence?
Yes.
thing?
Yeah, we just bring it all up, kind of like we did here. We just bring it all up at one time, and when you approve it, you'd be approving kind of the slate, if you will.
I have a question, Doug. How do we determine how deep our regulation, how do we determine which pools we regulate and which pools we don't? Because some of the above-ground pools can be fairly permanent in installation, with a deck around them and that kind of stuff. Do we have authority to regulate those? And
Well, yeah.
Above ground pools count.
Yeah, yeah, any
pools,
yeah.
any above ground pool then counts. All right. I've had that question in the past, and I really didn't know the answers.
Somebody go to Walmart and buys 10 of these plastic ones. They may be breaking the rules. They stack them all up.
I think there's actually codes issued. I can't speak. I mean, I'll just mention this. I do know some. I know in the past that some of those ones they sell at like Walmart or Sam's or something like that actually qualify under the building code as needing the fences around them, and a lot of people don't even realize that. So that's something to be aware of.
Okay, so we're gonna look at this at the next
Day meeting. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Everybody okay with that? Okay. Discussion on 9 a.m. meeting?
Yeah, and kind of good segue into the next item. Of course, back in the, I guess that was the April meeting, we did a 3-month trial with the 9 a.m. meeting time for this particular meeting. Of course, this is the 3rd month now that we've been doing that. If you would like to keep doing that, we'll need to make an amendment to our bylaws to change that. But I thought after the 3-month time frame, I'd bring this back up and let you all discuss it. If you like the 9 a.m., if you prefer to go back to 1 p.m., so I'll just.
What's your wishes?
I like it.
It's me.
Everybody okay? Do we need a motion on that?
I don't like it. I'll do what everybody else.
Apparently Salem doesn't either. He's not here.
That's my discussion. I don't like it, but I'll do it.
And I'm gonna join in with Jeff.
The issue is Monday morning. Those of us that have, work-related, get the week started kind of deals on Monday morning. It's an issue.
Does it have to be a Monday? Could
No.
it be a Tuesday?
Could be a Tuesday if you want.
Any, 9 o'clock any day besides a Wednesday is good for me.
Tuesday morning, okay? Would that be at 9 o'clock? That's
I
it.
don't have Monday.
Oh.
So that Monday?
Try and please him.
I'm going to make a motion then to amend it to 9 o'clock on Monday mornings.
Okay, what we'll do, go ahead and we'll act on
I'll
it.
second it.
Okay. All in favor of the motion,
Still
say
love
aye.
you, Jeff.
What we'll do is at the next meeting, we'll bring in the amendment to the bylaws, and we'll go ahead and advertise next meeting at 9 a.m. Then we'll make an amendment to the bylaws to that effect. So.
Okay. Is that everything?
I believe that is all I have.
I had something under other business. What about our sign ordinance? I've had some people contacting me, want to know if we're going to put a committee together and to work out whatever differences there were. I know we're not in a real hurry, but we do need to keep the thing going along. And one thing was apparently Mr. George Huddleston has a PowerPoint presentation. It was mentioned at that public hearing. He wasn't able to be here, so people want to know if we could invite him to come to our next meeting and make that presentation to talk about sign heights and things like that.
Yeah, and I think what we could, since we're not, I mean, we probably weren't going to bring it up at the next night meeting anyway, but I mean, I think we could probably handle that the next day meeting, and we can make sure that Mr. Huddleston knows.
Yeah, we can
about
invite
that.
him and
Yeah.
give him an opportunity to make his presentation maybe, and if that's okay with everybody else. And if we are going to put a committee together, when are we going to discuss that?
well,
We're
I
going to
get-
get some people from the
yeah.
sign industry and maybe from just some regular people that aren't on any of the committees, just some general public people involved.
Well, I don't know if we necessarily need to put a committee together for this. I mean, I'll leave that up to the planning commission if that's the route they want to go. The questions that were asked and brought up at the last meeting, we're working through right now. Right now I've got about 3 or 4 pages of questions and responses that I've been working on. The issues that were brought up, I think we can handle without a committee myself. I mean, they seem pretty straightforward. Not that they won't require some discussion or anything like that, but I think just having more work sessions on that. I mean, we can invite them into the work sessions. We can have the whole planning commission present. I think that does the same thing as opposed
There's
to
as much
putting it to a
transparency
subcommittee.
as we can have.
Right,
We've
and
got
I
people out there
yes,
saying
I
they
agree.
want
Right.
something done.
Mhm.
Want to make sure they get a chance to have their voices heard, and
And-
more than just
you're
come to
right.
the public hearing and then they're gone. You know, I
Right.
wanted to
Sure.
keep some people in.
And I'll just throw this out there for anybody who may be interested. The other, I guess that was last week, Mr. Sandlin had me speak to a group that he's involved with, I believe it's the Middle Tennessee Auctioneers Group, and kind of presented to them the changes that we were talking about. They were mainly more concerned with the auction signs, not so much everything else. But they gave us several ideas to look into that we'll try to incorporate into our sign regs as well. And like I said, I mean, if a committee is the direction you all want to go, then I mean, obviously we'll do that. But I think at this point, I think we have enough direction from the comments that were made and from the commission that we're able to work through those comments that were made. So.
Okay, let's just wait. Mr. Huddleston will hear his report, and then we'll talk about some.
Yeah,
more
because really, a lot of
impasse
most of the from the comments that we've received so far, most of the comments really centered around the temporary signage, the interstate signs, and maybe a little bit of the digital signage. Those are really the primary areas that they were looking at.
Flag.
And the flags, yeah, and that was the other. So, those are the four, I guess. Those were the primary issues that were brought up, and I do think that as staff and the Planning Commission, we can work through that. So.
Okay, immediately following, I need a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Have a second.
Second.
All in favor of that motion, say aye. Immediately following, Mr. Mark Lee will have a presentation. Does anybody need to take a 5-minute break?
Yeah, let's
All
take a
right.
little break just to give them time to set up too.